Facebook Live for you as Norwich confirm that Ben Godfrey has been sold to Everton. Shock, and I'm sure it is what you're all feeling, as we've been expecting this for 4 or 5 days now. Club record fee confirmed by the club, although not the exact details, but widely reported, of course, that starting off at 25 million with potential for more. So Paddy, Connor and myself thought we'd get together for a quick chat about Ben's Norwich career, really. But Connor, if I just come to you first, you spotted some interesting quotes about midfield, which I'm sure are going to get people going.
Yeah, absolutely. In this, if you go on to Everton's official story where they've announced his arrival, 5-year contract, all that good stuff. If you scroll down a little bit to his quotes, it's interesting that he kind of says predominantly he's a centre back that can play on the right or the left, but he's also played at full back and at holding midfield. So I don't expect that debate about Ben Godfrey as a defensive midfielder to end anytime soon. It's going to be interesting to see where sort of Ancelotti fancies him. I mean, we already had the quotes last week, didn't we, about how he saw him as a very good centre back, and I think realistically it's probably going to be quite hard, certainly at the moment, to displace Allen and Doucouré after the starts of the season that they've had. But yeah, very interesting that he holds that view himself, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting how he gets into that team. I mean, Yerry Mina and Michael Keane, 2 very good centre backs, aren't they? Both international players. So he may just have to be a bit patient, and be interesting if Adi Boothroyd comments on it at all ahead of the England Under-21 games in terms of whether he's concerned about Ben getting the game time that he wants and things like that. But Pat, to sort of go back to the start almost, they brought him in January 2016, the same window that they brought in Maddison. The club have actually put in their story that it was an initial 150,000, but at the time it was reported as being worth up to $1 million, wasn't it? And he's been one of those players that you really have seen develop, haven't you?
Yeah, and that previous point, he's a centre-back. You don't pay 25 million for a bits and pieces player. So I can understand why he's throwing that quote in there, because, as you rightly say, he needs to try and get himself into that 11, particularly how well they've started under Ancelotti. But Ancelotti sees him as centre-back all day long. They were trying to get Tomori out of Chelsea. That didn't happen. There was a link to a Barcelona lad who I now see is interested in Fulham, apparently. Bearing in mind it's the final day for the overseas window. He's a centre-back, and he's a centre-back because Daniel Farke, against the grain, said after he'd been at Shrewsbury and was one of, if not their most influential players in that season as a holding midfielder, they got to 2 Wembley finals. No, he's a centre-back. He's potentially, I even remember the quote, it was along the lines of from Daniel, it could be a very solid championship holding midfielder / Premier League maybe as well, to give him his due, but it can be a world-class centre-back. And people scoffed. And he may not turn out to be a world-class centre-back, but he's currently good enough for the Premier League leaders and a man who's won how many European Cups as a player and a coach to feel he is potentially a very, very good player. And 25 million plus is not an inconsiderable sum in these COVID climate that we exist in now. So it's an amazing story. Yeah, it is. Because as I say, Daniel has seen that in him, and it's one thing to see it; it's another for him to mould him into that. And also, a lot of credit goes to Ben that he was willing to, because you can imagine as a young player, he's come back from Shrewsbury. I'm a holding midfielder now. No, mate, you're a centre back. If you want to get in my team, you're a centre back. And it's a credit to that man that he showed the right character and the attitude, and it's paid off for him in a big way. England Under-21's captain. He's now got himself a dream move. Let's be honest. I mean, Everton looks like a club heading places under a very experienced world-class coach. So it's all there for him now if he can go on and kick on again. I'm just interested to see now, because I think we would all agree he's not the finished article, and there was areas of his game and that inexperience was found out quite routinely in the Premier League. But is it now one of those where a player moves on and he's playing with better players, and that's no disrespect to Norwich, he's playing at a higher level, and he rises to the challenge, and then he goes on and he looks comfortable at that level, and you think, well, yeah, he really is the real deal? Because I think there's still question marks, because what Everton are buying for me is potential, and how soon that potential is realised is quite a fascinating story for the next stage of his journey.
I should just say that you are getting us on Periscope or Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. So we can see your comments. So do get them. We've got a few coming, so we'll come to them shortly. But just to come back to you briefly, Pat, York had a sell-on fee as well, didn't they? It was reported at 10% at the time. Do we think that's right? And obviously 10% of the profit made on this deal is a sizable amount of money for York, who are North now, are they?
I'd have to double check that, mate. They're definitely in a National League setup. Yeah. It's in a region about 2.4.
Didn't they?
Okay, yeah, it's in the region about 2.4, 2.5. I think that 150, yes, it might have been that initially, but there was clauses related to England appearances, as in 21s, and also there was a promotion clause as well. So I think you're probably talking that was a bit nearer $1 million than it was 150 in terms of the final payment. So the 10% sell-on was on the profit. So we'll say hypothetically Norwich paid $1 million in total for that deal. He's gone for 25, but obviously these things are all, we never fully availed of all the clauses and all the final figures. But if you were to say in the region of about $2 million for York, which is for a club in the National League, given that they're reliant on bailouts now as from government sources. But funny enough, I've got a friend who lives in York, and his lad, he's now in the Hull Academy. He was in the York Academy, so he's still pretty close to people at York, and they're a little bit concerned now that if they get, or if this money is coming to them, they might not get the share of that government bailout now, which would be a bit harsh, because ultimately York are being penalised for excellent youth development, because they spotted him originally. I think he was in and around Middlesbrough's academy and wasn't deemed good enough, but York picked him up. He's a York lad, and they set him on the road. So that would be a very harsh outcome if the government bailout doesn't come to York, because they feel they're already going to get $2 million from Norwich. But it's a great story, and in these times, it reminds you that that if a lot of clubs went at the base of the pyramid, or if it looks radically different now in a post sort of COVID world, we might not get a lot of these stories anymore, because there won't be the Yorks to develop a Ben Godfrey for Norwich to pick them up, to then develop them, to then go on to Everton. And that's the great danger for me. And it's all right sort of saying, well, we'll look after our own if you're the Premier League or the top end of the Football League, but it does matter. And it underlines it today with this story. You see it less and less, but there is still players in the lower leagues who can be in the right development with the right coaching, can be moved on again. So, yeah, it's just a reminder for me that how important it is to do what we can to protect the base of the football pyramid as well.
Yeah, I just checked it. They are still National League North, because they were vying with Kings Lynn for the title last year, didn't they? And obviously lost out on points per game in the end. I wasn't sure if they'd been moved into sort of the reorganisation, but it looks like they are still National League North. So, that could literally be, regardless of the government situation. And to me, that would seem that at that level, it needs to be fair across the board. They all get the same amount. But for York to get potentially millions out of this deal is... well, that could be completely change the direction of their club. But anyway, we're mainly focused on Norwich City, of course. But that January 2016 window has taken a lot of flack over the years. So that was still Alex Neil and David McNally, wasn't it? But it brought in Maddison and Godfrey for low fees. If I remember rightly, Godfrey had a trial with Leeds when he was younger as well. I think maybe when he was released by Middlesbrough. So they sort of have missed their opportunity with him there as well. But yeah, I mean, I know that was the window when you got Naismith, but Closer and Pinto, all right, maybe Closer sort of verging on club legend territory, but Pinto wasn't everyone's favourite. But I'd say for that they've generally been considered successful signings overall with Norwich fans, although I was never particularly big fan of Pinto defensively. But yeah, so fair play to the guys who were in place at the time. Neil, let me just pull this one up onto screen for you. Says he's developed physically, he's fast and technically good. Feel he just needs an experienced centre-back partner to guide him. Right, Connor, so if I bring you in on this, this is the... I remember seeing him when he first came through for the 23s. He was in the under-18s team that made it to the quarterfinals of the Youth Cup alongside Todd Cantwell, Jamal Lewis, lost at Manchester City. I was up there for that game. And you could see he had all that potential quickly, but it wasn't necessarily a smooth transition into it. And even in the title-winning season, it wasn't until Christmas when he really came into things, was it?
No, it wasn't. And funny enough, I mean, you speak about sort of the start of his journey there. I think they signed him, and as we saw throughout his Norwich City career, didn't really have a specific position for him to develop in. We saw him play in midfield. Funny enough, for all the talk about him being a defensive midfielder, he only played there 3 times for Norwich in 78 appearances. He played at full back as well, didn't he? I remember Alex Neil playing him at right back, I think, against Peterborough in a friendly at one point as well. So they tried him there. And then, as you said, it was only really that loan at Shrewsbury that sort of really got him on the map. And then we saw him come back to Norwich. And even then, as you said, he had to buy his time and be patient. And there were people with sort of eyebrows raised after Daniel Farke made that comment about the potential to be a world-class centre-back, because they saw what he'd done at Shrewsbury in helping them, and he was named in their team of the decade, wasn't he, for that season? So there was a lot of confusion around his best position, but you've got to say fair play to Daniel Farke, really, because the way he's moulded him and the way he's developed over the last couple of years, in particular, probably from that Shrewsbury loan up to present, I think has been incredible. And Neil's right in terms of physically he has developed, but actually there's a lot of size to his game that's developed as well. And I mean, we were talking the other day, weren't we, about the way he's sort of curbed his aggression a little bit as well, and and maybe utilised that in a good way rather than the way that it was coming out at the start of his Norwich career. And you've got to give credit to the coaches who have worked with him, because there's obviously been a lot of work for him. Shrewsbury as well, I think, have to take credit, because they took a real chance, really, Paul Hurst at the time, on a player who hadn't really played a lot of football, and they really got the best out of him. So it's been a long journey. It's been a sensational story, and I kind of looked this weekend and saw Ollie Watkins scoring goals, David McGoldrick, etc. And it comes back to what Paddy was saying about the importance of the EFL and just how much talent there is there. And this is another example of it. Maddison is as well. He's a product of the EFL, and so many players are now, and it's so important, as Paddy said, that we protect that. But Godfrey's gone from someone who didn't have a natural position to being maybe overly aggressive, to a £25 million centre back. I think that's a hell of a story, and I think Norwich fans will look back on him with real fondness as well, and probably have the same sort of feeling they have towards Maddison as they watch him, no doubt, go on to heights. And I'd be shocked from here if he didn't get at least an England cap, given the perhaps shortage of centre backs. So a really good move for him as well, a really good club under a really good coach, and it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how he develops from here, because as Paddy rightly says, he's got a long way to go for me.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke to him at the sticker swap shop last year, didn't we? And we went and spoke to him and Todd and me and Connor here, and we got them to sign their stickers, didn't we? We interviewed them at the club's fan hub, and that was the first time I sort of spent a bit of time with him like that, rather than in a mixed zone after the game. And he seemed a really friendly lad as well. I've always thought he's maybe a little bit shyer than you might expect, than his personality on the pitch, because he is quite aggressive, and he loves being a part of the team, doesn't he? Like that famous goal against Reading, that dramatic night towards the end of the Championship title winning season, when he smashed in that goal. And these bursts of pace as well. Stoke at the end of that season, we saw it at Huddersfield again at the start of this season. So the ability there is what really, well, the potential is huge, and it's going to be as well. Not everyone, a lot of Norwich fans, I think, keep a close eye on what the former players do and are interested and want them to do well, like Maddison, but not everyone, because we do get some people who moan about the amount of coverage former players get, don't we? Right, let's go to a couple of comments. There's quite a long one here from AD Sedgwick, so I think I'll leave that up there while I read it out. I think it's a great deal for us, to be honest, considering what we paid for it originally. I'm just getting sick of so-called Norwich fans keep having a go at the owners about the way the club is run. At the end of the day, we are not a big club. We are a self-sufficient football club, and we will sell players at the end of the day. So we could have a lot worse owners. All I would say to the people who would have a go at the club, sorry, it just slipped out of my view.
Be careful what you wish for, Dave. Be careful what you wish for.
It's such a long one. Be careful what you wish for. Right, if I knock that back down again and come to you on that, Pad. But so this is the system working, isn't it? This is what the club want.
Well, it's no surprise, is it? That particularly, again, keep going back to it, but no supporters in the stadium for Norwich is a huge plank of their revenue that they're currently unable to tap into. So it places an even higher premium on player trading, because what are the other revenue streams? Yes, they're currently armed with Premier League parachute money, but that's a very short-term fix if they don't get back to the Premier League anytime soon. The revenue that they will generate from being in the Football League is pennies in comparison. So it's a very straightforward scenario. I saw something on social, I don't know the veracity of it, that not only in the Premier League, but in the Championship, Norwich's owners are the least wealthy, if that's the right term, compared to the other 24 or 5 clubs in the division. So not only in the Premier League, but in the Championship, they're the poor relations, relatively speaking. So that is indisputable facts. If that is the case, how do you trade when your wage bill is tens of millions of pounds every year? There's only one way, and that's selling players. And whether fans want to accept that or not, I wrote about this yesterday, that the genius of Webber and Farker is that in this period, albeit they slipped back on the pitch last season, but they've married the financial transformation that needed to happen with footballing success on the whole. You know, they're still, if they were to both leave this morning, Norwich City on the pitch and off the pitch are in a considerably healthier state than they were when they walked through the door in 2017. So by that measure, they have pulled off a bit of a two-card trick, really. And again, this is just the latest episode that they've managed to develop a player, sell him for considerably more than they paid for him, and they feel, and we saw the start of maybe that at the weekend, that they've already got another player who can come in, and on the pitch they won't be really that dramatically weakened in Ben Gibson if he kicks on from a very encouraging debut. So that's the model. You know, heaven forbid, we'll probably get into this now, Max Aarons goes in the remaining 11 days, because it's worth just stressing for anybody who's a bit unclear. You'll see a lot about deadline day today. That's simply for overseas transfers. So if Norwich wanted to sell to an overseas club, they've got until 11 p.m. today. But it's the 16th of October for the Premier League to buy and sell domestically. So in theory, then Norwich will have to hold off until October the 16th if they don't want to sell to a Premier League club. But if a Max Aaron was to go, then you've got Sam Barham when he comes back from injury. They obviously think Barley Mumba can step in. Not ready at the minute, but that's the nature of it. And that's where Webber's genius has to come in, finding the right moment in the right cycle, both from a financial point of view, in terms of when they're at their peak of their potential value, but also the footballing side as well, that you don't leave Daniel completely hamstrung in terms of putting the team out on the pitch, which is competitive in the Championship. And we can debate whether you improve your chances of going straight back if you sell a Jamal and sell a Ben, and heaven forbid sell a Max and an Emmy. The answers are you don't. But ultimately, they will feel they're still more than competitive enough to be competing at the top end of the table. But the bottom line is, you are a self-funded club. Every club, I think, outside the Premier League to a greater or less extent is a self-funded club. So Norwich aren't unique. They've just made more play of it, perhaps, than most other clubs in the country.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of the difference in personality amongst football fans, because it's sort of common sense, really, isn't it? That you keep building like that, you keep selling until hopefully you get to the point where you achieve some stability, and then you can resist big offers like a 25 million. Because frankly, in the current scenario, offering 25 million for any of the players, the club have got to consider it, haven't they? Because it's difficult times, financially challenging times. But you know, to get 40 million up front for Jamal and Ben, I'd say is decent value, certainly in the current market, and fills that black hole, doesn't it? It certainly secures the club's future. And well, I guess they may have already spent a bit of the money that they brought in, you know, when they already did their business early. But let's throw that forward a little bit and then look at what this is going to mean for the team then. Let's bring this comment up from Nick. Gutted with Gibson in, he replaces Godfrey going out, but we're left with 3 injury-prone centre-backs now. Have we really strengthened the depth with those issues? What do you make of that, Connor?
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Daniel on Friday say that to some extent with the options they had at the club now, they were kind of crossing their fingers a bit with the fitness stuff. I mean, Gibson has only had 4 weeks and Hanley's only had 2, hasn't he? Zimmerman has obviously had a major injury last season, so I understand the fear. You would be absolutely shocked, and you would probably have to sort of think there was some sort of curse if they found themselves in the same situation they had last year in terms of defensive injuries. So you would hope that wouldn't be the case, and you would think really that they're probably due some luck in that position. But realistically, you look at it, it's 4 options. I guess you've got Alex Tetty to drop in if absolutely need be as well. So that's probably 5 in terms of real cover. So you would think that would be more than enough really to cover them for a season. And of course, if they need to look at it again in January, then I guess they can with maybe a loan or something. So it's, for me, is this enough to get them through to January? Absolutely. I can't really see any issues in that regard. I get that there's probably concern about the long-term fitness of Grant Hanley, for example, who's had multiple injuries since he joined the club. Tim Closer as well. Christoph Zimmermann, I think, has been a bit more sturdy, although last year obviously he had some time out as well. And Ben Godfrey really was the constant, wasn't he, last season in a defensive line of change. And I get the cause of concern. I think judging from his debut, and it's dangerous to judge it off one game, but I think Ben Gibson's going to be a welcome addition in terms of what he offers, and that's just in terms of intangibles. You could hear him. I know it's an empty stadium, but I reckon you could probably hear him throughout Riverside with his booming voice on Saturday. So it's a good sign. But yeah, I get the issues with depth, but on paper it's 5 options. If you chuck Tetty into the mix as a sort of makeshift option, and that should be more than enough coverage for me personally.
They had Andrew Omobamidele on the bench at Luton, didn't they? So he would seem to be the sort of next one off the rank in terms of the academy, because Famewo's out on loan at Charlton, Bashiri over with Michelin in Belgium. So they're both sort of out of contention for this season. Right, we'll keep it to about another 5 minutes, because obviously we've got plenty to crack on with it being a Monday morning, but we have got a few other questions coming in. Craig Brown asked, would you start with Vrancic in the next game, considering he nearly set up a goal for Aaron's against Derby? I considered discussing that in the 6 Things, which is at pinken.com at the moment, of course, as usual on Monday morning. And although that was a gorgeous cross for Aaron's, he had 25 minutes on the pitch, and I don't think he did loads. There were a couple of sort of half-hearted penalty appeals and injury time, but mainly because the next game is Rotherham away, I would be surprised to see Vrancic coming in for Steedman in that game. Perhaps the 2 home games after that, Wickham and Birmingham. So we will see. Pat, I'll come to you with this one. Wendy Little would love to see 2 strikers on the pitch. I think Pukki has had his time on the pitch. He seems to have lost his mojo. Hugill and Ida for me.
Well, it will happen if the GOAT continues to fire blanks. And you know, I went back to what I said last season. I think he's gone over the top. I think the best days are behind him. It's sad, but that's the reality of it. And I think the fact that Hugill's come in is probably the club just trying to ensure that if that is the case, that they have other options. What I would say is, apart from Huddersfield, I think all 3 have ended up on the pitch at the end of the game. I'm not sure just throwing on strikers, because to me that doesn't seem to be, you know, a very considered approach. It's literally just Alamo job, and it's not really worked so far. If you look at the results, he really needs to grasp a nettle in terms of, you know, I mean, he made a big call to drop him last season on the project restart period. He might have to do that again, and then if he does, that does really impact on the rest of the side in terms of the shape, because Hugill isn't a similar type of player. Ida is more closely, but he's very raw. So it's not just a case if you take Pukki out and you bring those 2 one-off in. It does alter then the balance of how he wants to go about dominating games in terms of possession. But something ultimately, you know, they've fired 2 blanks now in the last 2 games. Something needs to change. And, you know, you don't go out and bring in a Premier League striker and then sit him on the bench and then give him 10 minutes in each game. So that is definitely one area of the team. If you're playing a 2, to take the question, then that probably necessitates a change of shape behind them, whether it's the 3 at the back. Don't think you can really play that now. We've talked about they've got 4 centre-backs. I mean, you literally need 3 and Closer if he was the one to miss out on the bench. So I don't see them immediately going to a wing-back system to accommodate 2 strikers. I think it will be Pukki on the other side of the international break, but he will know better than any. If he's not scoring goals, he'll be out the side. And ultimately, to try and think in terms of how Daniel's thinking, Ida has been the first reserve on both the last 2 occasions. In fact, Huddersfield, he came on and scored a goal. So it feels like Daniel's thinking if Pukki's not doing the business, it'll be Ida before Hugill, which is an interesting dynamic, given that they've gone out and spent money to bring that lad in from West Ham. So Yeah, I hope I'm wrong, but I fear Timu's probably better days are behind him, and if that is the case, they need to come up with an alternative plan B that is residually effective.
Yeah, Eder first 2 games when he came off the bench was really good, but I think the last 2 it's not really happened for him. So I thought that was brilliant how Hugo managed to, again, Grant Holt-like, the way he was so determined to get on the end of that cross from Skip, and it was an excellent save from David Marshall. He could have been the hero on Saturday, and then I don't think there'd be any doubt would that he'd have been forcing his way in. But the other thing I think you can say for Cookie is that the last 2 games been up against 5-man defence on Saturday, but 3 central defenders essentially, and he's just been snuffed out, hasn't he? But he is working, and first half on Saturday I thought he certainly was putting in the effort. Just a couple of quick ones, and I'll come to you on the midfield question, Connor, but a quick one again from Nick. After the break, if we fail to get 6 points from Rotherham and Wickham, do you think they'll stick by Farker? Yeah, well, I think minimum 4 points from those 3 games immediately after the break is what most people will be looking at. And Connor, this one for you from Craig Brown. Pull it up again. Tessie should still come back into the team. Rupp did okay in the first half against Derby, where he made the tackle in his own half near his own box, but Rupp gave away the free kick, which led to Rooney goal from the free kick. So for that reason, I would drop Rupp because he does not offer enough defensively, in my opinion. Now, I've discussed this a fair bit in the 6 things today. So if you want my view, then read that. But Connor, what do you think?
I think it would be extremely harsh after the last 2 performances to drop Lucas Rupp, particularly Saturday. I felt he was more than effective, and he does give away the free kick, but it's Alameda who loses possession initially, and he hasn't really got a lot of choice. Either he commits the foul and it's a free kick from 25 yards, or the lad goes through on goal. So it's not really a trade-off there for me, and it was a yellow card taken for the team. And again, he's just a player that seems to take a lot of stick for whatever reason. I actually felt him and Skip showed a lot of promise on Saturday, and I actually think going to Rotherham, as you referenced, the very physical side who are going to be very hard working. I think those 2 probably are your best bet actually in terms of physicality, in terms of nicking the ball, with maybe a more creative trio ahead of them. So I would stick with Lucas Rupp personally. I think probably Tetty and Skip. If you lined that up at Rotherham, I think most fans would probably argue that that's a bit too pragmatic. So I'd keep Rupp in there. I think he's a bit of a terrier. He supports the attack. Never does anything spectacular. I don't think he'll make many highlight shows this season, but in terms of what he offers to the team overall, I think he does give them a balance in midfield. So I would stick with him for now. I guess the alternative really is Kenny McLean in that position. It seems to be one of Rupp or McLean, both of whom are very hard-working players. And on the evidence of their last 2 performances, it's Lucas Rupp for me.
Yeah, and Neil basically agrees with you there. Fans are jumping on the bandwagon for Rupp. They don't see the dirty work he gets through. I totally agree. I think Rupp has been one of the better players the last 2 games, and I think there's been some real promising signs of his relationship with Skip. But yeah, he should have brought down Knight sooner. Like, he was near him, right near the centre circle. So he should have taken that foul 40 yards from goal rather than 25 yards from goal, or less than 25 yards. And the final comment before we crack on, again from Neil. Who are the players you guys feel that will have the same impact as the likes of Aarons, Lewis, Godfrey, etc.? There now looks like a clear development path for youngsters and an attractive proposition for youth players to sign. I mean, Eder, obviously, we've just been talking about. Josh Martin, I think when he gets into the team this year, I think he's going to make an impact if and when he can get in. I like the look of Famulo, so it'll be interested to see how he gets on at Charlton. But then the interesting thing is where Norwich are next season, isn't it? If you think back to sort of Tom Adeyemi, Corey Smith, if they get promoted, then it's difficult for someone to come back in from a loan and get in. But otherwise, Paddy, I think we're kind of already seeing the ones who are the next ones off the conveyor belt, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't think with the depth of squad they've got now and the experience they've brought in, they won't dip below that this season. Certainly the ones you've mentioned, Eder and Martin, are the 2. I'd get Martin in now. Not impressed with Onel Hernandez's output so far this season. I think he wouldn't offer anything less. And the little bits and pieces we've seen, I mean, that free kick he scored in pre-season was just, well, it was Rooney-esque, dare I say it, against Darmstadt. The boy has ability, and we won't know until he's thrown in, and that's a nice maybe way to bring it full circle. We didn't know until Aaron's got thrown in at Ipswich, how good he could be. Godfrey as well. Jamal before that. Let's get him in. What's to lose? They've played 2 games. They've not really looked like scoring, let's be honest. 2 Marshall saves aside and a bizarre penalty miss. But for all that possession, so a young lad who probably plays with just no fear, carefree, off the cuff, he could be the spark. It needs something like that, I fear, on the other side. And as I say, for me, Hernandez isn't offering enough. Not the only one in that front 4 on Saturday, but that would be my call straight away.
Yeah, I think Josh Martin's a real talent. I'm excited to see what he can do when he gets in. Right, thank you very much for joining us. A club record sale gone through this morning. Initial £25 million. Ben Godfrey to Everton, 5-year deal for them, playing alongside James Rodriguez. It's a bit of a step up, isn't it? So fair play. Good luck to him. I'm sure most Norwich fans will wish him well. It'll be interesting to see how he develops. Full stories at pinkin.com. Our Q&A will be at 1 o'clock at pinkin.com as well as usual if you've got any more questions that we didn't get through for now. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. We'll catch up with you soon.